44 countries, 10,000 years of history, one impossible flight. This is Europe, from where Asia ends to where the Atlantic begins. No cuts, no borders we skip. We start where two continents meet. Right now. We begin in the only city on Earth that stands on two continents. This is the gateway to Europe. Turkey, where Asia hands the journey to Europe.
Istanbul.
Two continents, one city. For 10,000 years, every empire that mattered crossed this strait. Europe begins here under these cables. Hagia Sophia has been a church, a mosque, and a museum across 15 centuries. For 1,000 years, it held the largest dome on Earth. Cappadocia. People carved entire cities into this soft volcanic rock. Underground homes 8 stories deep, hidden from invaders for centuries. Ephesus was one of the greatest cities of the ancient world, home to 250,000 people, and a wonder of the world long since vanished. Greece, where the Western mind was born. The Parthenon is 2,500 years old. Democracy, philosophy, and theater were all invented within an hour's walk of this hill. Santorini is the rim of a drowned volcano. The eruption that sank its center may be the origin of the legend of Atlantis. Meteora means suspended in air. Monks built these monasteries on 600-meter rock towers, reached only by rope ladders and nets. For 1,000 years, Delphi was the center of the world. Kings and generals traveled here to ask the oracle what the future held. Thessaloniki has been ruled by Greeks, Romans, Byzantines, and Ottomans. Its white tower was once a prison so feared it was called the Tower of Blood. Now we cross into the Balkans, the most fought-over land in Europe, where empires were born and where they came to die.
Bulgaria.
One of the oldest nations in Europe. For centuries, Rila Monastery kept the Bulgarian language and faith alive when the nation itself had vanished from the map. A country hidden in the mountains. Plovdiv is older than Rome, older than Athens. People have lived here for 8,000 years, making it one of the oldest cities on Earth. This valley grows the roses that scent the world's finest perfumes. It takes 3,000 flowers to make a single gram of rose oil, worth more than gold. North Macedonia, a young name on ancient land. Lake Ohrid is 3 million years old, one of the oldest lakes on the planet. Its waters hold creatures found nowhere else on Earth. Skopje's stone bridge has linked the old and new city for 600 years. It was the birthplace of one of the world's most famous women, Mother Teresa.
Kosovo.
Europe's youngest country. Prizren is the cultural soul of Kosovo, a town where mosques, Orthodox churches, and Catholic spires share the same skyline beneath an ancient fortress. This monastery has stood for 700 years, its frescoes among the finest in the Byzantine world, painted before the Renaissance even began. Albania, a land sealed off from the world for 50 years. They call Berat the city of 1,000 windows, white Ottoman houses stacked up the hillside, their glass facing the sun for 2,500 years. For decades, this coast was forbidden, guarded by concrete bunkers against an invasion that never came. Today, it's Europe's last secret Mediterranean shore. Gjirokastar is built entirely of stone, even its roofs. This mountain fortress town has watched over the valley since the time of knights. Serbia, the crossroads where east meets west. Belgrade Fortress has been destroyed and rebuilt 40 times. More than almost any city on Earth. It guards the spot where two great rivers become one. 200 stone towers rise here, each crowned with a dark stone cap. Local legend says they are wedding guests turned to stone by the devil himself. Here the mighty Danube squeezes through a canyon a mile deep. A Roman emperor cut a road into these cliffs 2,000 years ago. You can still see it. Montenegro, the Black Mountain by the sea. The Bay of Kotor looks like a Norwegian fjord dropped into the Mediterranean. Its town walls climb almost vertically, 1,200 steps up the mountain. Once a fishing village, this entire island is now a single luxury resort. Kings, film stars, and royalty have all stayed behind its medieval walls. Demeter hides the deepest canyon in Europe, the Tara River Gorge, 1,300 meters straight down, second only to the Grand Canyon. Bosnia, where East and West collided for 1,000 years. Mostar's bridge survived empires and 2 world wars, then was shelled to rubble in 1993. They rebuilt it stone by stone from the original quarry. Some bridges carry more than people. In Sarajevo, you can stand on a single street and see a mosque, a synagogue, an Orthodox, and a Catholic church. They call it the Jerusalem of Europe. Here the Bosna River simply erupts from the foot of a mountain, ice-cold and crystal clear, the source of a river born in a single moment.
Croatia.
1,000 islands and a coast of stone. Dubrovnik's walls have never been breached in 1,000 years. This stone city was so perfectly preserved it became the throne of a fictional kingdom watched by millions. 16 lakes spill into one another here through hundreds of waterfalls. The water is this impossible blue because of the living rock growing beneath it. Var is the sunniest place in Europe, and the scent rising off it is lavender, grown across the island's hills for hundreds of years. A Roman emperor built this palace to retire in 1,700 years ago. People never left. Today 3,000 live inside its ancient walls. Slovenia, where the Alps meet the Mediterranean. A church on an island, a castle on a cliff, and the Alps behind. Lake Bled looks invented. To ring the island bell, you climb 99 stone steps. This castle is built inside a cliff. For centuries a knight held out here against a siege using a secret tunnel through the cave behind the walls. Ljubljana guards its dragons fiercely. They crown its famous bridge and its coat of arms. Legend says the hero Jason slew one here on his way home with the golden fleece. We enter the heart of the continent, Central Europe, a land flattened by war and rebuilt, again and again, into something more beautiful than before. Hungary, the jewel of the Danube. Budapest's parliament has exactly as many rooms as there are days in a year, and a dome as tall as the cathedral, a building meant to say this nation will endure. When this chain bridge first joined Buda and Pest, it united 2 rival towns into one great capital. It was a wonder of its age, and it still glows every night. Its 7 white towers stand for the 7 tribes that founded Hungary 11 centuries ago. From up here, the whole city opens like a storybook. Beneath Paich lie Christian tombs 17 centuries old, painted underground when this was a frontier town of the Roman Empire.
Romania.
Land of castles and dark forests. Palace was Europe's first castle with electricity, central heating, and an elevator. A king's dream palace hidden in the Carpathian forest. The world knows it as Dracula's castle. The real story is stranger. A mountain fortress guarding the pass between 2 ancient lands, wrapped forever in legend. A dictator carved this road across the highest Carpathians as a military escape route. Today it's called one of the greatest driving roads on earth. These monasteries are painted inside and out with brilliant frescoes 5 centuries old. Bible stories told in color, so even those who couldn't read could understand.
Moldova.
One of Europe's least visited corners. Monks carved this monastery straight into the cliff above the river, living in caves of stone for centuries. It is the spiritual heart of a quiet country. Beneath this gentle capital run the world's largest wine cellars, over 100 miles of underground tunnels, holding 2 million bottles in the dark.
Slovakia.
A small country crowned with castles. From this castle hill you can see 3 countries at once: Slovakia, Austria, and Hungary. Few capitals sit so close to the edge of their own nation. Spies is one of the largest castle complexes in all of Europe, 4 hectares of walls and towers, standing guard over the plains for 900 years. The High Tatras are the smallest high alpine range on Earth, a complete world of peaks, glaciers, and lakes packed into just 25 kilometers. Czechia, the city of 100 spires. Prague's astronomical clock has ticked for over 600 years, the oldest still running. Every hour, death rings his bell and a parade of saints appears. 30 saints line the Charles Bridge, guarding a crossing 6 centuries old. Beyond it rises the largest ancient castle complex in the world. The river wraps almost all the way around this town, like a moat drawn by nature. Cēsis Krumlov has barely changed since the Middle Ages. Silver made this town one of the richest in medieval Europe, rich enough to build a cathedral to a saint who protects miners working deep underground.
Austria.
Empire of music and mountains. Schönbrunn has 1,400 rooms. A 6-year-old Mozart played in its halls for the empress, and promptly proposed marriage to her daughter. People have mined salt in these mountains for 7,000 years, making Hallstatt perhaps the oldest still inhabited village in Europe. Its beauty is now copied across the world. This fortress has never once been taken by force in 900 years. Below it lies the city where Mozart was born. Nowhere else does a great city sit so directly beneath the high Alps. From Innsbruck streets, a cable car climbs 2,000 meters in minutes. Poland, a nation that refused to disappear. Wawel was the seat of Polish kings for 500 years. Beneath it, legend says, sleeps a dragon, and Krakow still parades a fire-breathing dragon every year. Every hour, a trumpeter plays from St. Mary's Tower and stops mid-note, marking the moment a medieval trumpeter was struck down warning the city of attack. Miners spent centuries carving an entire cathedral out of salt. Chandeliers, statues, even the floor, everything you see down here 800 years deep is salt. Warsaw was 85% destroyed in the war. The Poles rebuilt the old town brick by brick from old paintings. It looks 400 years old. 70. Germany, the powerhouse at Europe's core. A reclusive king built Neuschwanstein as a fantasy of a medieval past that never existed. He died before it was finished, and it became the model for every fairy tale castle since. For 30 years a wall ran right past this gate, splitting a city and a world in two. When it fell, the world watched here, the symbol of a continent made whole again. It took 600 years to build Cologne's cathedral. In a war that flattened the city around it, the cathedral took 70 hits, and still it stood. No river in the world holds more castles than this stretch of the Rhine. 40 fortresses in 60 kilometers, each once a robber baron charging toll on the water below. Hamburg has more bridges than Venice, Amsterdam, and London combined, over 2,000 of them, crossing the canals of one of Europe's greatest ports. These dark woods gave the world its fairy tales, Hansel and Gretel, Little Red Riding Hood, all born from the shadows of the Black Forest. Heidelberg's ruined castle holds the largest wine barrel ever built, big enough to hold 200,000 bottles, with a dance floor built on top of it. We reach Western Europe, the small, crowded corner of the world where art, science, and revolution rewrote how all of humanity thinks. The Netherlands, a country built from the sea. Amsterdam is built on millions of wooden poles driven into the marsh, laced with 100 kilometers of canals. A whole city floating on the water it conquered. 19 windmills stand here, 3 centuries old. For 1,000 years the Dutch have used them to pump the sea off their land, because much of this country lies below the waves. Once, a single tulip bulb here cost more than a house. The world's first financial bubble was built on these flowers, and the fields still blaze every spring. This quiet town gave the world Vermeer and the famous blue and white pottery copied everywhere. Delft looks today almost exactly as it did in his paintings. Belgium. Medieval cities frozen in time. 600 years ago Bruges was one of the richest cities in the world. Then its harbor silted up, time stopped, and it was preserved exactly as it was. They call this the most beautiful square in the world. Gold-trimmed guild halls built by medieval merchants to outshine one another. Every 2 years it's carpeted entirely in flowers. This moated fortress was built by a crusader count 9 centuries ago to terrify his own rebellious citizens. A true medieval castle, in the middle of a living city. Luxembourg, a tiny fortress nation. Vianden is one of the most beautiful feudal castles in Europe, so beloved that the writer Victor Hugo lived in its shadow and sketched it again and again. Luxembourg City sits on cliffs honeycombed with 23 kilometers of rock tunnels, a fortress so strong it was called the Gibraltar of the North. France, the most visited country on earth. Paris hated the Eiffel Tower when it was built, meant to stand just 20 years. Today it's the most visited monument on earth, and the soul of the world's most visited country. Mont-Saint-Michel becomes an island when the tide rushes in faster than a galloping horse. For 1,000 years, pilgrims risked the quicksand to reach its abbey. Chambord has 400 rooms and a double staircase some believe Leonardo da Vinci himself designed. 2 spirals that wind around each other but never meet. For a few weeks each summer, Provence turns violet and the air hums with bees. Monks have tended these lavender fields beside their abbey for 800 years. The Côte d'Azur invented the seaside holiday. Artists came for its impossible blue light, the same blue that drew kings, writers, and the whole world to this coast. Versailles has 700 rooms and a hall lined with 350 mirrors, built by a king who declared himself the sun, and made all of France revolve around him. Colmar looks like a fairy tale come to life, and it is. Its candy-colored houses and canals inspired the village in a famous animated film loved around the world. On these beaches, on one June morning in 1944, the largest invasion in history began. 150,000 men crossed this water to take back a continent. Carcassonne is the largest walled city in Europe, 3 kilometers of ramparts and 52 towers. So perfect it was nearly demolished as a fake. Now it's untouchable. The Romans built this aqueduct 2,000 years ago to carry water 50 kilometers to a single city, and built it so precisely it dropped just 1 centimeter every 100 meters. We crossed the Pyrenees onto the Iberian edge, the far southwest of the continent, where Europe runs out of land and stares into the Atlantic. Andorra, a nation high in the mountains. Andorra has no airport, no army, and was ruled for 7 centuries by 2 foreign princes at once. It survives, high in the Pyrenees, by selling skiing and duty-free. At over 1,000 meters, this is the highest capital in Europe. For 3 centuries its parliament met in a single stone farmhouse, one of the oldest in the world. Spain, where 3 cultures built a golden age. Gaudi's Basilica has been under construction for over 140 years. When its central tower is finished, it will be the tallest church on earth, a mountain made of stone and light. The Alhambra is the finest Islamic palace in the West, every wall carved with lace-like stone and poetry. Its last sultan wept as he surrendered the keys and rode away forever. Madrid's royal palace is the largest in Western Europe, over 3,000 rooms. The royals don't even live in it. It's simply too vast. Seville's is the largest Gothic cathedral on earth, built so big the architects said that those who saw it would think them mad. Columbus is buried inside. These strange rounded peaks gave Montserrat its name, the serrated mountain. A monastery has clung to its cliffs for 1,000 years, guarding a famous Black Madonna. For over 1,000 years, pilgrims have walked hundreds of miles across Europe to this cathedral, said to hold the bones of an apostle. They still arrive on foot today. Ronda is split in two by a gorge 100 meters deep, joined by a single stone bridge. This dramatic town gave birth to modern bullfighting and inspired Hemingway and Wells. Portugal, where Europe sailed off the edge of the map. From this tower, the great explorers sailed into the unknown and brought back a new world. Belém was the last thing they saw of home, and the first on their return. Porto gave its name to port wine and to the country itself. Its great iron bridge was built by a student of the man who made the Eiffel Tower. Pain Palace explodes with color, red, yellow, purple. A romantic king's fantasy crowning a misty mountain, surrounded by a forest he filled with trees from across the world. The sea has carved these golden cliffs into caves and arches, including a cathedral of rock with a hole in its roof, lighting a beach reachable only from the water. Cabo da Roca, the westernmost edge of mainland Europe. For 1,000 years, sailors stood here and believed this was the end of the world, then sailed past it anyway. Now we turn back east, to the alpine heart of the continent, and to the smallest, richest nations in the world, tucked between the mountains. Monaco, the smallest kingdom by the sea. Monaco is smaller than New York's Central Park, yet it's the most densely packed, most expensive land on earth. A whole country stacked between the mountains and the sea. Once a year, the streets of Monaco become the most glamorous racetrack in the world. Formula One cars threading between the crash barriers and the sea at 300 kilometers an hour. Liechtenstein, a storybook principality. This is one of only 2 countries in the world doubly landlocked. You must cross 2 borders to reach the sea. Its prince still lives in the castle on the hill above his capital. Switzerland, the rooftop of Europe. The Matterhorn is the most photographed mountain in the world, its perfect pyramid so iconic it shapes a famous chocolate bar. Its first climbers reached the top, then 4 died on the way down. Bern is named after the bear, and still keeps bears beside the river that wraps almost entirely around it. Einstein imagined relativity while living on its medieval main street. This island castle inspired poets like Byron, who carved his name in its dungeon. Above the lake climb terraced vineyards the monks planted nearly 1,000 years ago. 72 waterfalls pour into this single valley from the cliffs above. It was so beautiful it inspired Tolkien's Rivendell, the elf valley of Middle-earth. The Rhine Falls is the most powerful waterfall in Europe, a wall of water crashing around a lone rock you can climb, formed when the Ice Age rerouted an entire river. We descend into Italy, the peninsula where the Roman Empire, the Renaissance, and half of all the art in human history were born. Italy, where civilization became an art form. 50,000 Romans once roared inside the Colosseum. For 4 centuries, gladiators fought here, and the arena could even be flooded to stage mock sea battles. Venice is built on millions of wooden poles sunk into a lagoon, 118 islands laced by canals, with not a single road. A city that should not exist and has for 1,500 years. For a century no one knew how to build Florence's dome, the largest since Rome. A goldsmith cracked it, raising 4 million bricks without scaffolding. Still stands unmatched. The towns of the Amalfi Coast spill down cliffs straight into the sea, joined by a road so winding it terrifies and dazzles in the same breath. The Romans called it heaven on earth. These hills are a living Renaissance painting: golden fields, lone cypress roads, stone farms. This is the landscape that taught Western art how to see depth and light. 5 tiny villages cling to these cliffs, joined for centuries only by footpaths and the sea. Their people carved vineyards into near-vertical rock, building thousands of miles of stone walls by hand. The Dolomites glow pink at dusk, a phenomenon so famous it has its own name. These pale peaks were once a coral reef at the bottom of an ancient sea, lifted 3,000 meters into the sky. Etna is the highest and most active volcano in Europe, erupting almost constantly for 500,000 years. Whole towns live on its slopes, farming the rich black soil it leaves behind. People have lived in Meteora's caves for 9,000 years, one of the oldest continuously inhabited places on Earth. Once a national shame of poverty, now a treasure of the world. San Marino, the oldest republic on Earth. San Marino has been free and independent since the year 301, the oldest surviving republic in the world. 3 towers crown its mountain, a nation that has outlasted every empire around it. Vatican City, the smallest country in the world. Michelangelo designed this dome at the age of 71, the largest in the world. Beneath it lies the largest church on Earth, holding 60,000 people. The Vatican is the smallest country in the world, yet inside it sit the Sistine Chapel, the Pieta, and 2,000 years of art per square meter. The smallest nation holds the most of humanity. We fly far north now, into the land of the Vikings and the midnight sun, where Europe reaches up toward the frozen edge of the Arctic. Denmark, the gateway to Scandinavia. These colored houses have lined Nyhavn for 350 years. The writer Hans Christian Andersen lived here, dreaming up the fairy tales the whole world grew up on. This is Elsinore, the castle where Shakespeare set Hamlet. For centuries it forced every ship passing this narrow strait to pay a toll or be sunk. On this sunny Baltic island stand the largest castle ruins in northern Europe, and round white churches built to double as fortresses against pirates 1,000 years ago. Sweden, a kingdom of forests and islands. Stockholm is built across 14 islands where a lake meets the sea, a capital floating on water, its medieval old town one of the best preserved in Europe. Abisko is one of the best places on Earth to see the northern lights. Its mountains create a hole in the clouds, a clear blue window onto the dancing Arctic sky. Gothenburg was laid out by Dutch engineers who cut canals through the marsh. This grandest fish market is a church of stone. Locals call it the Fish Church. Visby is wrapped in a ring wall 3 kilometers long, studded with towers, a perfectly preserved medieval Viking trading town, scattered with the ruins of a dozen ancient churches. Norway, the land of the fjords. Geirangerfjord was carved by glaciers over millions of years. Cliffs rising 1,400 meters straight from water so deep that whole mountains hide beneath the surface. For 4 centuries, German merchants ran the cod trade from these pointed wooden houses. Bergen's Briggen Wharf has burned and been rebuilt the same way again and again for 900 years. Pulpit Rock is a flat cliff hanging 600 meters straight above the fjord. No railings, no barriers. Just a square of stone, the sky, and the water far, far below. Trolltunga, the Troll's Tongue, is a sliver of rock hanging 700 meters over a glacial lake. Reaching it on foot takes 10 brutal hours. We get there in seconds. Tromsø sits deep inside the Arctic Circle, where the sun never rises for 2 winter months, and the northern lights burn green above the city almost every clear night. Svalbard is one of the northernmost inhabited places on Earth, where polar bears outnumber people, and a vault carved into the ice guards the seeds of every crop humanity grows. Nordkap is the northern tip of Europe, a cliff over the Arctic Ocean where, in summer, the sun never sets. The next land beyond is the North Pole itself. Finland, the land of 1,000 lakes. Helsinki's gleaming white cathedral crowns the city by the sea, so Nordic in its beauty that filmmakers have used it to stand in for old St. Petersburg, just across the Gulf. Suomenlinna is a fortress built across 6 islands to guard the Gulf, once called the Gibraltar of the North. Today, its old ramparts are home to 1,000 Finns. In Lapland, the Finns believed the northern lights were sparks from the tail of a magic fox sweeping across the snow. Here, the aurora burns over an endless white silence. Rovaniemi sits right on the Arctic Circle, known across the world as the official home of Santa Claus, where the post office receives letters from millions of children every year. Iceland, the island of fire and ice. This church was designed to look like the basalt lava columns of Iceland itself, frozen rock shaped into a spire, towering over the world's northernmost capital. Every few minutes the ground here explodes, boiling water blasted skyward by the heat beneath the island. This is the original geyser, the one that gave all others their name. You can walk behind this waterfall into the roar and the spray. It pours 60 meters off a cliff that was once Iceland's coastline, before the land itself rose from the sea. Iceland's interior is so alien that astronauts trained here for the moon. Above its black lava deserts and glaciers, the aurora burns in the long polar night. The Blue Lagoon's milky blue water is heated by the volcano beneath it, rich in minerals, steaming against black lava. Iceland is still being built, fire and ice even now. We drop down the Baltic coast, 3 small nations of medieval towns and dark forests, free again after a century under foreign rule. Estonia, a medieval jewel turned digital nation. Tallinn has one of the best preserved medieval old towns in all of Europe, yet this same tiny country invented the technology behind video calls and became the world's first digital nation. Half of Estonia is forest, wild, ancient, and full of bears, wolves, and lynx. This coast is scattered with giant boulders dropped by glaciers 10,000 years ago. On this windmill-dotted island stands the best-preserved medieval castle in the Baltics, and a famous crater where a meteorite struck 4,000 years ago, burning itself into legend. Latvia, the Art Nouveau capital of the North. Riga holds the greatest collection of Art Nouveau architecture in the world. Whole streets of facades carved with faces, beasts, and flowers. A city dressed as a work of art. Jurmala's white sand beach runs for over 30 kilometers beside the pines, lined with delicate wooden villas where the elite of an empire once came to take the sea air. This castle was a stronghold of the Crusader knights who conquered the Baltic 8 centuries ago. Inside its dark towers, visitors still explore by candlelight, just as the knights once did. Lithuania, once the largest country in Europe. 600 years ago, Lithuania was the largest country in Europe, stretching from the Baltic to the Black Sea. Its capital's Old Town remains one of the grandest Baroque cities of the North. The Soviets bulldozed this hill of crosses 3 times. 3 times, in the dark, Lithuanians came back and rebuilt it. Today, over 100,000 crosses stand here, the hill that refused to die. Trakai Castle sits on an island in a lake, reached only by a footbridge, the fortress home of the Grand Dukes who once ruled the largest realm in Europe from this very water. We cross the sea to the British Isles, 2 rain-soaked islands on the edge of the Atlantic that once ruled a quarter of the entire planet. The United Kingdom, the islands that built an empire. Tower Bridge still splits and lifts for tall ships, just as it has for over a century. Beyond it, London stretches, once the capital of the largest empire the world has ever seen. Stonehenge is 5,000 years old, older than the pyramids. Some of its giant stones were dragged 200 miles, and no one truly knows how or exactly why. Edinburgh's castle sits on the plug of an extinct volcano, besieged 26 times in its history, more than any place in Britain. Beneath it winds a medieval city of dark closes and ghosts. Glencoe is the most haunting valley in Scotland, beautiful and grim, the site of a betrayal and massacre 3 centuries ago that the Highlands have never forgotten. These lakes and green fells inspired England's greatest poets and the tales of Beatrix Potter. Wordsworth called it the loveliest spot that man has ever found. For 800 years the world's greatest minds have studied here: Newton, Darwin, Hawking. The chapel's stone ceiling is a miracle of engineering, hanging without a single supporting pillar. York Minster is the largest medieval Gothic cathedral in Northern Europe and holds half of all the medieval stained glass in England, glowing as it has for 700 years. 40,000 stone columns step into the sea here, formed by cooling lava 60 million years ago. Legend says a giant built them as a bridge to fight his rival across the water. Ireland, the Emerald Isle. The cliffs of Moher rise 200 meters straight from the wild Atlantic, running for 14 kilometers. On a clear day you can see the whole western edge of Ireland, and nothing but ocean beyond. Trinity College guards the Book of Kells, a gospel hand-painted by monks 1,200 years ago, so intricate it was once believed to be the work of angels, not men. The Ring of Kerry winds along Ireland's wildest coast, where green mountains tumble into the Atlantic, the emerald heart of the Emerald Isle. On this jagged sea rock, monks built a monastery 14 centuries ago and clung to the edge of the known world. 800 stone steps still climb to their beehive stone huts. And so we come to the last stretch, 2 island nations in the Mediterranean, where the journey ends and where the oldest myths of Europe began. Malta, a fortress in the middle of the sea. Valletta was built by knights as a fortress city after they held off one of history's greatest sieges. Every street, every bastion was designed for defense, a city built by warriors in honey-colored stone. The water in these sea caves glows an unreal blue, lit from below by white sand and the Mediterranean sun. Boats have drifted into the blue grotto to witness it for generations. Mdina was Malta's capital for 2,000 years, a walled city on a hill where only a few hundred still live. They call it the Silent City, where no cars are allowed and time stands still. Cyprus, the birthplace of a goddess and the end of our journey. Cyprus has been ruled by everyone who ever crossed the Mediterranean: Greeks, Romans, Crusaders, Ottomans. Its castles and harbors hold 3,000 years of empires layered upon each other. Aphrodite's Rock, where the Greeks believed the goddess of love rose from the sea foam. 44 countries crossed. 1 continent explored. The impossible flight ends where mythology begins. 44 countries. 1 continent. Every border crossed, from the Bosphorus to Aphrodite's Rock. This was Europe. Next, we fly across Asia. And one day, the whole impossible